Hi everyone, John Davenport here from Photogrammetry.com with another community edit. This week we're going to be working on a photograph submitted by Mark from the forum, and I think it's a fun photograph. Part of me wishes that it was a raw photo, not a JPEG, but when you photograph in JPEG, that's what you're left with, and you can still do a lot with a JPEG. It's just you end up with a little bit less information. So anyway, let's hop on into this edit here. One of the things that Mark mentioned in his email to me was that he had tried to capture the sky and include that in the photograph to help show scale. And while I think that's a good concept, we did end up kind of blowing out the sky here. So what I think I'm going to do to show scale is just kind of focus in on these people here. And we really have, I mean, these people are really tiny compared to the walls and everything else going on. So I think that in and of itself, I think that particular aspect of this photograph does a better job at showing scale than the sky itself does. One other thing that you could do, but it might be a little bit harder to do, is to try and go into Photoshop and get, blue sky from somewhere. You really only need a little piece of it, and then you could potentially have, blue sky there. And that would also fix that problem. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to crop out that aspect of the photo. A 5x7 crop works really well. It's just below that line, and it still leaves a pretty good amount of the building and the walls on the side here. So it does a really good job for me anyway. The next thing that I'm going to do is work on just kind of balancing the exposure here. We are a little bit on the underexposed side. It's a little bit dark, particularly this left-hand side of the rock here. So what I think I'm going to do is just first kind of play around with just the basic controls. Now, because it's JPEG, again, you're not going to see as dramatic of a recovery in your shadows or in your highlights, but they are still there. You are still able to do some recovery. So just because it's JPEG doesn't mean you can't do anything. It's just that there's not as much to pull from. And then I'm going to try and raise the exposure just a little bit here. But what I notice happening as I raise the exposure is my building in the background here starts to get maybe a little bit too hot. I wasn't there. I don't know what the actual tone of this building is, but to me, I think it's probably a little too bright. I think it detracts from the building, from the photograph. So I'm gonna try and control that by dropping the highlights down some more. So I think we have some pretty good detail here, especially in the rocks. One of the things that you can do to really kind of amplify that detail is increasing the clarity slider. So I'm going to go up about plus 50 or so on that, and that'll really kind of put some detail into these rocks and the rock formations on the walls and the rocks on the floor here. Now, another thing that's tough to do when you're not in the when you're not the one that took the photograph is to kind of gauge the white balance and the color that is supposed to be in the photo, especially in something like this where you have these rock walls and these buildings that are kind of, you don't know what they're going to be like. I've seen canyon walls that are more clay, or some that are pinker, or different shades of red and orange. So it's kind of more of a guess for me, and what I think looks good. So I'm going to go kind of maybe something like this, very much pretty close to where the camera had it, maybe just a little bit warmer. And let's see, I may add a little bit of vibrance to it to kind of really try and bring out some of the colors in these walls here. I think it adds a little bit to the photo if I do that. They kind of look really cool. Now, I don't know if that's what it actually looks like in person. That's one of the things that you just have to deal with when you're editing someone else's photograph. And the final thing that I'm going to do here, or at least one of the final things, is I'm going to add a little bit of contrast to really try and bring out the different details here in the tone and just kind of crisp up the photograph. So I think this is pretty good. I think we've come quite a ways from this more of a flat, straight out of camera photograph, and we've kind of amped it up a little bit, added some color, and cleaned up the highlights a little and the shadows. Coming down to the detail tab, you could always add a little bit of sharpening. Sometimes, especially, I find like JPEGs tend to be a little softer when they get compressed. So it's always nice to go through and maybe add a little sharpening. And that really crisps up those edges there and makes this photograph a lot more appealing in my eyes. Finally, I may try and see what happens if I add a radial filter here to the center. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to an invert mask, and I'm going to grab my shadow slider, and I'm going to just increase my shadow slider and maybe decrease my highlights slider, and then maybe just a slight increase of my exposure. And it's a very subtle change here, but if I go and I turn this off, you'll see, you can almost see it. So you get a little more brightness here in the center of the photograph. Some people may not like it, some might. I don't know, you can let me know in the comments below what you think about it. But I think it helps to draw the eye in even a little bit more here. Not that you need it, because you do have all these leading lines, and the photograph really does kind of focus you in as it has been shot that way. But I think that the just that very subtle addition there does help to bring in the view there and control it a little better. So anyway, let me know what you think of this, and as always, please send me your photographs, and you could maybe see your photo edited on one of the next community